And I was kind of depressed. I mean, how far do we carry each other's burdens?
You know that we're called to do what God has called us to do, but to leave the results and the future in God's hands, that Muslims, Jews, Christians, all would go with the teachings of Jesus and the Beatitudes. But the Lord's Prayer is what really captures me. I guess everything I believe is captured in that.
You're good at this. When we went to England, I remember this gentleman came up and talked to us. You led him to the Lord right there. It was really interesting. We didn't go to him. He walked up to us. It was strange.
Yeah, he said, I need to talk about God.
Yeah. It was the most, I'd never experienced anything quite like that. And we talked to him, and Tony prayed with him. And this guy had a horrible life. He had no family where he left, and he had no family where he was going. He had no one in the world. And I'd never met anyone like that. And I was kind of depressed. I mean, after hearing his story, I was just down, and Tony was just skipping along. And I said, how do you hear something like that and let it go so quickly? I mean, how do you not? He said, he's not my problem. And it sounded cold, but the more I thought about it, we did what we were supposed to do.
That's right.
And we are not supposed to, I mean, are we supposed to, how far do we carry each other's burdens?
You know, there's a great situation where Mother Teresa was being interviewed, I believe it was by Dan Rather, and she was asked a very simple question. She said, you know, you're an old woman now. You're the one that brought in the recruits that work with the Sisters of Charity. You raised all the money for this movement of working with the poor and the oppressed and the Sisters of Charity. When you're dead, who's going to take over? Who's going to run Sisters of Charity then? Who will raise the money? Who will bring in the recruits? She sat there and said, it's none of my business. What a great answer. It's none of my business. It's about time that we recognize that we're called to do what God has called us to do, but to leave the results and the future in God's hands. Do what you have to do, and don't worry about this, that, or the other thing. Just commit yourself to doing the will of God as God has led you.
Because you cannot carry everybody's load.
No, you
can't.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
The thing is, if you were to ask me my favorite verses, I would have to go to the Sermon on the Mount and go to the Lord's Prayer. I love the Lord's Prayer.
I do too. But the Sermon on the Mount, do you love it because it convicts you so much? Or why do you love it?
It doesn't so much convict me as it inspires me.
Oh, it does?
Yeah, it does. When I read the Sermon on the Mount, I say, wow, this is a set of ethics. These are a set of values that the world does not question. I have a Jewish friend who puts out a magazine called Tikkun Magazine, Michael Lerner. It's a very, very sophisticated social justice magazine for the Jewish community. And when there was this big argument about having the 10 Commandments in the courtroom, I said to him, Michael, how do you feel about that? He said, well, they really shouldn't put the 10 Commandments in the courtroom. I said, why not? He said, well, first of all, that commandment that says, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's ox, his ass, his manservant, his maidservant, his wife. I mean, that connotates that the wife is property. I don't believe that women are property, that men own. It's not something that a man owns.
I didn't think it that way.
Well, that's because you're not thinking enough.
Oh.
Okay? And remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. You don't keep the Sabbath. I don't keep the Sabbath.
But I don't mean it's right. I'm kind of leaning towards we might should.
Sabbath would be Saturday.
Yeah.
That's right.
I can take that off.
So, yeah, okay. But I'm saying we usually worship on Sunday, do we not? Make no graven images. I don't know how many of the students here went to see the movie The Passion of Christ. But if you believe Jesus is God, that's a graven image. And so he said, I said, what could you put on the courtroom? He said, this is a Jewish guy. He said, if you put the Beatitudes on the courtroom, I could go with the Beatitudes. He said Muslims, Jews, Christians, all would go with the teachings of Jesus and the Beatitudes. Wow. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are they who mourn. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you and say all manner of evil against you because you stood up for righteousness, for social justice. Rejoice and be. He said I could go with the Beatitudes because I think that's an ethic that in fact includes everybody. But the Lord's Prayer is what really captures me, Mike, because I guess everything I believe is captured in that. It starts off with Our Father. And you know that the word Father in that verse is what? You know what the word Father is?
Abba.
You're right. It's Abba. Which, you know, we don't see that as shocking. But to the ancient Jews, that was shocking.
Like saying daddy.
Yeah, and to the ancient Jews, God was the Shekinah and the Holy of Holies in the temple. And you were stood in awe and in fear. And all of a sudden, this God that is awesome and fear and distant and far off and totally other, as Soren Kierkegaard called God, totally other. Suddenly, this God who is totally other, this God to be feared. Here's Jesus saying, no, I want you to talk about God as Abba, your intimate Father. You're this close person, this one who has great intimacy with you. Our Father who art in heaven.
And I like the word our.
Yes.
Not just mine.
You know, you can't.
He's our Father.
You know, you can't pray the Lord's Prayer in the first person singular, can you? You can't pray, give me this day my daily bread. You've got to what?
Include.
Give us this day. And so when you pray the Lord's Prayer and you pray for the hungry to be fed, you're not just talking about yourself. Give us, all of us, daily bread.
Yeah.
When you pray the Lord's Prayer, you're bringing the whole hungry human race before the Lord in prayer. And that's what drives guys like me into becoming incredibly committed to social justice and feeding the hungry and standing up for the oppressed.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed. Hallowed means holy?
Yeah. Hallowed be thy name. And in the ancient world, name told people what you did for a living. For instance, in the ancient world, if somebody was named John Baker, you knew he was a baker. If the person's name was Mary Butcher, you knew she was a butcher. Or Bill Shoemaker, you knew he was a shoemaker. Name told you what a person did. When you say, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, you're really saying, God, show me what you do. And more specifically, if you read it in the original, let me see what you can do through me. That's the way we ought to pray. When we get up in the morning, you want to enter into this intimacy with God. And you should be saying, okay, here I am, God. Fill me with yourself. And let me see what you can do through me today. And then give us, first thing after that is thy kingdom come. And you know, I think that when I was growing up, and I guess it was the same with you, the whole idea of being a missionary or a minister was to get people into heaven when they died.
Right.
I mean, I can remember sitting in church, 12 years old, the minister's yelling, are you ready to die? I'm 12 years old. And if that didn't scare me, he always had threat number 2. You don't have to die. The trumpet could sound. And the Lord could return. It kept me on the straight and narrow. No matter what I wanted to do, my minister would say, what if the Lord returns? The next time I went to the movies, Mark, I was scared to death. I was sure I was going to get halfway through the flick, and the trumpet would sound, and the Lord would return. Throughout eternity, I'd be grabbing people saying, do you know how that movie ended? That's what really scared me. Be this as it may, here's what has to be said. Thy kingdom come. The reason why I'm out there preaching and calling people to surrender their lives to Christ is not to get them into heaven when they die, as important as that is. That is very important. But the main reason why I want to win people to Christ is because Christ wants to work through them to change the world that is into the kingdom of God. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done where?
On earth.
On earth. Please, not pie in the sky when you die. I want to see God's kingdom actualized in history. And whenever I see people filled with God's Spirit, fighting against poverty, working to end war and conflict, working to end the oppression of enslaved people, wherever I see that, I say, there is God at work. God's will is being done.